In 2016, a movie entitled The Man Who Knew Infinity was released. It was based on a biography by Robert Kanigel about Srinivasa Ramanujan, a famous mathematician. The movie focused largely on Ramanujan and Hardy, two mathematicians, and their work on the partition function. What is it? Well, this is what it is. It looks insane, very complicated. But it's not actually that hard to understand. It's just asking how many ways can I add to a number? For example, if I have the number 3, I can do 1 plus 1 plus 1, or I can do 2 plus 1. And you just count the number of ways you can add up to it. But because this formula is so complicated, people couldn't find it, and they thought it was impossible to find any way to even approximate the number of partitions. However, Ramanujan came up with his so-called circle method, which bounded complex coefficients with an expounding boundary in the complex plane. I know this is a bit complicated, but this just goes to show how amazing Ramanujan was. And the movie focused a lot on this, but it didn't focus on Ramanujan's life a lot and what led up to him coming up with these amazing formulas. So I thought it would be apt to share a little bit about that. And lots of that is in Kanigel's biography, so I'll be primarily using that. Ramanujan was born in 1887 in India. He encountered smallpox at the age of 2. This was a problem throughout Ramanujan's life as he constantly got sick time and time and time again. But he got through it, and he had a fairly dull childhood. Not a lot happened. It was average. By high school, though, things started to pick up for him. He started to have things going his way. He was doing really well in school, and then he got a scholarship to the local government's college. It was full ride, so he was super excited. And there were a few interesting things that happened here. Perhaps the best account is by Dr. K. Janahardhan on his website Ramanujan Institute, where he notes that Ramanujan didn't care for anything but mathematics when he went. He had done well in school, but that's just because teachers had given him an A, or the like. At college, when he actually had to take the test and know the material, he just skipped it all and just focused on the math. So he failed and lost his scholarship. At that point, he actually ran away without telling his parents and moved to the nearby big city of Madras. Returning back to Kanigel's account, we find Ramanujan in Madras trying to figure out what to do with his life. He wants to study mathematics, but he doesn't know how to do it. So he starts attending some free courses at Pachayappa College. He hoped to pass the first arts examination, which was a test that would allow him to go on a scholarship to the infamous University of Madras. There, Ramanujan hoped he'd be able to get a good mathematics education and be able to make an impact in the world. However, Ramanujan got very, very, very sick. He almost died and had to go under the knife with surgery. So while that was happening, the first arts examination happened. He still tried to take it, even while he was undergoing surgery, but he failed everything but the mathematics portion. This was a very depressed time in Ramanujan's life. However, we enter a better period as he meets his soon-to-be wife, Janaki. The best account of this is probably found in Professor K. Srinivasa Rao's paper titled Janaki. Ramanujan's mother first met her when she was just walking around town, and she instantly begged Janaki's parents to let Ramanujan marry her. Janaki at the time was only 9 years old, which is insane by today's standards, but was the age of engagement in India culture at the time. They got along fairly well, and more importantly, Janaki's parents wanted Janaki wed by any means. They had a second suitor waiting in case Ramanujan couldn't marry her. So they were wedded very quickly within the year. But Janaki couldn't live with Ramanujan until she hit puberty, so there was a few-year gap in there where Ramanujan would just work on publishing mathematics. Once Janaki was of age, her and Ramanujan moved back to Madras, along with Ramanujan's mother. Ramanujan kept publishing, but he couldn't find good work. So he went to the person in charge of all the publications in the country, the head of the Indian Mathematical Society, and begged him for a job. The head of the Mathematical Society did get him one as a clerk. Ramanujan worked under him, but it was a fairly low-paying job. And the founder of the Mathematical Society realized that Ramanujan could do so much more. So he got along with a few other professors he knew, and they traveled up to Cambridge University, which was at the time the place to go for mathematics. It was the hub for it. They hoped there someone would take up Ramanujan's cause and help him. But every professor rejected them. No, they couldn't find anyone to help Ramanujan. This was largely because Ramanujan was Indian. There was a lot of racism going at the time because England owned lots of India. So Ramanujan got really upset by this. As soon as they returned, he instantly wanted to write letters to them himself. So he chose the top 3 mathematicians at Cambridge and started writing them letters, including a lot of his own results. All of his proofs he had to do on slate because paper was expensive, so he was only able to put the results themselves. So when 2 of the mathematicians opened the letters, they thought it was just, and I quote, the workings of a crook. So they closed it up and sent it back, thinking Ramanujan must be this crazy person or else had stolen the formulas. The 3rd mathematician, G.H. Hardy, opened it as well, thought it was crazy, and put it to the side, but he did read through it all and pondered it throughout the day. And by the day's end, he went back and looked at it, and famously said that the formulas must be true, because if they were not true, no one would have the imagination to invent them. So Hardy instantly sent a letter to Ramanujan begging him to come to Cambridge and study there. Ramanujan didn't actually want to go and move to Cambridge. He was just hoping to work from afar. But Hardy eventually persuaded Ramanujan, and now we enter the story we all know and love, Ramanujan's time in England. Hardy and Ramanujan began working straightway, publishing as many results as they could, because Ramanujan kept pushing and pushing, and Hardy was pushing back, actually. Try and ask Ramanujan to just study the basics, make sure you know the elementary techniques. It was a bit of a stressful relationship at times. Hardy enjoyed it, though, and at the end of his life actually said it was the one romantic incident of his life, referring to his time working with Ramanujan. Ramanujan wanted to see Janaki. He had had to travel there alone, and his mother, but he couldn't, because World War II broke out as soon as he got there. So he was trapped there for years in a depressed and sullen life. During that time, he became fatally ill in 1917 with what is now thought to be tuberculosis. As soon as the war ended, Ramanujan traveled back to India to be with his wife and mother. There they tended to him until he died, in their arms. He had hoped that by going to India and having the native diet and climate, he would be able to heal it himself. But, of course, tuberculosis had no cure at the time, so he died a fairly tragic death. He left a lot of unpublished and published works around him that are still being used today, and so we get to Ramanujan's legacy. His mock modular forms are being used to predict black holes today. His generalizations of Frullani's integral are being used to solve unsolved definite integrals that have been around for years. His study of elliptic functions and his creation of the theta functions has helped with string theories. They also helped him with the partitions, so it's created a huge amount of knowledge he's helped with. And then Ramanujan's summation has led to some really weird results. It allows us to give answers to some summations which would seem to go to infinity, like 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on, equaling negative 1/12. The most amazing thing, though, is probably Ramanujan's work on Fermat's last theorem. This is probably the most famous math problem in all of history that has gone unsolved for a long amount of time. Ramanujan was trying to attack it with something called elliptic curves, which was an unknown field at the time. No one had studied it in Ramanujan's day, but he wanted to attack it as hard as he could. Unfortunately, he died before he could finish the work, and the work was lost until the late 1900s. After Andrew Wiles rediscovered the work, pushed it forward, and solved Fermat's last theorem using it long after Ramanujan had died. This just goes to show how far ahead of his time Ramanujan was and how brilliant he was. He accomplished so much, overcoming poverty, racism, and constant sickness to have a generally good life regardless of his sickness and to change the world and mathematics forever.